Throughout history, Canadian and American forces have fought side by side to defeat tyranny and advance the cause of freedom.
One of the United States' top generals delivered a much-anticipated speech in Ottawa Wednesday, at a time when the Canadian defence community is deeply alarmed about the future of Canada-U.S. military relations.
The United States and Canada share the longest land border on Earth, but our connection goes far beyond geography. Shared history, values, and interests inseparably link our two nations.
Reassuring words from the NORAD commander, but the concern about NATO and NORAD, the cornerstones of Canadian national security, remain.
Absolutely shocking to see the U.S. president saying nice things about the Kremlin and President Putin, and basically in public repeatedly crapping on his allies.
Not to mention the open speculation about annexing Canada. NATO was founded to counter the Russian threat. It has been critical to Canada's international operations. From peacekeeping in the Balkans to the war in Afghanistan, the fight against ISIS in Iraq, and Canada's current commitment in Latvia. NORAD was designed to defend the North American continent. Recently, Canadian and American fighter jets commanded by a Canadian general met and pushed back a joint patrol of Russian and Chinese aircraft attempting to enter the Arctic.
The response that was met was a fully integrated response that has been decades in the making.
So what happens if the Americans pull their assets out?
The idea that we could ever rebuild under Canadian budgets what we have right now alongside Americans at NORAD is not doable financially.
Defense Minister Bill Blair acknowledged Canada has not done enough.
The current circumstances have told us perhaps we have been overly reliant on others for too long. And now is the time that we need to stand together on our own feet and get the job done.
Donna, there's no question that Canada must spend more on national defense, but the question is where, if we can't necessarily assume that the U.S. will stand behind its commitments.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks.
Help them out with the problem.
The U.S. president is hardly a NATO fan.
If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them.
Trump's feelings on the military alliance and his continued threats to annex Canada has left the Canadian military rethinking what's required to defend the country.
We're certainly making very significant investments in our capabilities and capacity in the North and investments in NORAD modernization.
While those investments have been significant, it's still well short of the 2% of GDP that all NATO countries have promised to spend on an annual basis. One way to quickly increase spending for CAF members?
We should spend more money on our troops. We should increase their pay. We should put more money into housing.
A goal shared by the Chief of Defense Staff.
Internally, it is very clear that our priority is recruiting, but also attached to that is retention.
More troops requires more equipment, but there are a few expedited purchases Canada can make.
The only real place where we can make a real big splash fairly quickly is to expedite the purchase of a new submarine to replace the Victoria class.
Those new submarines would likely come from South Korea, and where Canada buys its new equipment is now an important question after Trump's annexation talk.
We can expect to see the Americans challenging us on our position, and for no other reason than simply because he can.
The biggest U.S. purchase, the over $70 billion deal to buy F-35 fighter jets, expected to start arriving in Canada by 2030.
Any prime minister shipping large sums of money to the United States to buy American planes, it's going to be a really hard battle to justify that to the Canadian population.
Since the F-35s are U.S. built, the Americans are able to turn off certain capabilities of the planes, Donna, which could impact the Canadians in a direct conflict with the U.S. or a European mission that the Americans disagree with.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray, thanks.